Now, I am so excited to talk to Ola.
Yeah, me too. So as mentioned earlier, Ola is the owner of Soundtrack, and he's also created a company with co-founders that was eventually sold to Apple Music. And really, I think that's all the introduction he needs. So Ola, welcome to the show. So good to have you with us.
All the way from Sweden.
All the way from Sweden. And do they have any strange meat alcoholic drinks in Sweden?
Well, you just named the beer from Iceland. That's pretty close to us, and then obviously Denmark is just down there in the south. So that's close enough for me in terms of those products.
So I imagine that you started your music company Beats, and then you just sold it to Apple the next day without any trouble, right? Easy
Absolutely.
process.
That's usually how it goes in the music industry. It's very simple and goes very fast.
So what were some of the real challenges for you?
Well, I mean, it's actually my fourth startup in the music industry. So I perceive myself as somewhat a senior citizen in this industry, the music streaming kind of business. Jokes aside, I've been doing it for more than 10 years. So by no means does every kind of effort or company lead to a very successful exit, obviously. I usually say 9 of 10 days are really, really bad. And then the 10th day, things work out. So I think just in general, I focus on this industry because it's a very interesting macro in terms of the market is changing. Obviously, I don't know if you remember 10 years ago, we were buying CDs or we were actually buying tapes, or before that, records. Some people, younger people, don't remember that. And this whole industry basically changed right in front of us in terms of how music is being produced, how music is being distributed, and how music is being consumed, all at the same time. And I saw that happening more than 10 years ago and decided to move away from a previous career into the music industry based on the notion that I think a lot of things would change and that would provide a lot of opportunity. So I started from an intellectual exercise of entering a market based on market opportunity. And then obviously I had the privilege to do that, work with my passion, which is music. And that was based on obviously having somewhat of a successful previous career, being able to fund kind of the exercise of working with my passion, music. And 5 companies later, I had some successes and some failures as well. But it's not easy for sure.
So Ola, let me ask you. You say that the music business isn't easy. What are some of the differences between working in the music business as opposed to other kinds of industries?
I would say starting any type of company, looking at my friends here on the show, is super, super hard. I mean, you sometimes hear about the people who succeed, but you don't hear about the hundreds of thousands or millions who don't succeed. So just the notion of starting a company, trying to make it on your own is extremely challenging, stating the obvious, yes. But then the difference is perhaps with the music industry versus some other industries is that it's a fairly conservative industry. It is a industry that is more or less controlled by the owners of the IP, meaning the music in this instance, or the rights of for example, the songwriting. And given that the ownership of the actual art is so fragmented and so complex, when you're trying to distribute that art to an end consumer or a business, as I'm trying to do right now, you need to deal with the thousands of people that own the IP, right? And you need to get those people to agree on a way of distributing their beautiful art. And you need to have those people agree on a fair compensation for distributing that art. And those people are not always rational. Those people are not always business minded. They're somewhat, a lot of crazy people and great people in the music industry. So a fair amount of dysfunctionality in there.
Well, I think Kenya probably has a lot to say about this. Kenya, what do you think?
I was inviting him in here. Yeah, I was inviting her in here. Yeah.
I've met some of those folks.
Oh yes.
Creatives are hard to work with sometimes. I just had a quick question for you, Ola. I mean, obviously Dr. Dre played a big part in all of this as well. What was it like to work with him and collaborate on this project?
Amazing. I mean, so many brilliant people that you meet through the years, and crazy people, brilliant people, not so brilliant people that are even more crazy. But in the instance of him, he is an extremely smart entrepreneur. Obviously, his music career speaks for itself, and his ability to own his publishing and acquire publishing speaks for his business mindset. And then obviously taking the move from the artist and kind of music creation part of doing business to becoming a businessman and creating a hardware company with Beats by Dre, just at the point when the music industry was being completely bombarded by file sharing. It was just speaks for the timing that he has when to move on. So extremely inspiring.
So you said you had other companies before this, but this is your passion. So what kind of other companies did you have?
Kind of the interesting part of my life is if there is any, the last 12 years was post me taking the decision to go for it in the music industry and kind of go for the music streaming. So within the context of music startups, I've had a company that built hardware in the music industry, distributing hardware worldwide. I've had a online distribution platform for more radio-like product, a little bit like where you guys are right now, where you're broadcasting. And then I've had a music service, obviously with Beats, which is a consumer-facing music service, competing with Spotify, my Swedish friends across the street here. And then now I have a streaming service for businesses. So helping businesses play the right music in their business in order to, drive their business. So that's kind of within the music industry I've been doing. Before that, I was starting companies in completely different other industries.
So, Ola, what advice would you have to an artist who is trying to get known? So is there anything that you could share about that topic?
The whole idea with also the interesting thing about the music industry is that you get the ability to help artists and creators actually try to make a living, which is extremely hard if you're an artist nowadays. It's always been hard, but now you read about it more because there's just more people aspiring to become artists today. People don't think it because it's much easier to distribute. Back in the days, you would need a record contract to even, contemplate distributing your art. Now you can basically get a PC or a computer, produce something, upload it onto a distribution platform, and then go for it, right? So there's so much more buzz out there, so many more artists, which makes it way more complex for the artists aspiring because there are more artists out there. Previously, you would get a record contract, and when that record contract was signed, the label in question would somehow vouch for the opportunity and would invest in you. Nowadays, you basically have to do everything yourself. You have to, create the art, produce the art, distribute the art, market the art, and kind of figure out technology at the same time. So trying to kind of give, steady advice to anyone how to kind of make it in the industry, it all comes back to the art, right? So I think the first thing I would like to say, you can't, just create random music and think that you're going to break through. You have to be completely focused on the music that you produce and the quality of that music. That's stating the obvious, but sometimes, believe it or not, people tend to forget that little thing about production quality or actually, being a good musician.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, no matter how well it's produced, no matter how big the name, no matter what the video's like, if the song stinks, then I'm not going to like it and I'm not going to buy it, right? So really quality artisanship is probably the most important fact. If it's good, then it catches on, right? And people like it.
So what advice would you give to entrepreneurs now in general I mean, we're in such a strange time now. You really do have to promote yourself using digital means because nobody can meet in person right now.
Yeah.
What advice do you give people that are really trying to build a company right now?
So I think it's been a strange year, right? Everyone's kind of still trying to figure out what just happened, and I think all of us who are doing small, big companies have changed so much on how we work. We're not meeting anymore. We're working from home. Some industries, like actually right now, the company that I'm running, Soundtrack, our customers are the restaurants, the bars, the retail stores that shut down. So I've had a very interesting year in terms of challenge, but we made it through. We have a company we're live in 74 markets, so we were able to kind of move in between markets and move our efforts in between where it was open and closed, but very, very, very challenging.
I have checked out Soundtrack's website, and I looked at it, and it looks like a really great service because, first of all, the rates are extremely reasonable. And number two, it's easy to pick the kinds of music. You just sign up through an app, and it offers a wide variety of music. So I think there's a lot of establishments that will be taking advantage of that in the future once things normalize a little bit.
You don't realize how you kind of miss that, right? Like, it's one of those things that's gone right now that you don't even really think about. And then I'll go to the grocery store sometimes. They're always playing music there, right? And it's kind of like, oh, okay.
Well, it enhances the experience for sure. So
the whole idea with this was that the right music at the right place at the right time just really augments the experience, creates this. We all know when we've been to a place where the music is great. So there's a whole science behind that. And what I've done is I've taken the streaming revolution that we've all seen in the consumer market, and I've applied that to the business market. It's basically that simple in terms of idea. So trying to answer your question, what do you do as an entrepreneur trying to drive kind of your company or your brand in these challenging times? And it goes kind of back to the same response that I had to being an artist. It's back to the idea. And kind of the business fundamentals when you created your business idea. If those are really good, that's obviously a good starting point. And if it's an interesting story to tell, that obviously creates an opportunity to spread that message. But then again, what I always say to aspiring entrepreneurs or talking about my experiences is that ideas are great, but 99% it's all about execution. And executing on the idea. So I would say this year was obviously, even more than other years, very much about executing in very challenging times. And business is a lot about executing, and business is a lot about standing through the days that hit you in the face when you wake up. And my statement of 9 out of 10 days, that's pretty much entrepreneurship in a nutshell. I don't know if the others would agree, but that's my experience. It's extremely challenging. You have to stand up to the challenges and not give up. So perseverance, I would say, is the core component when you're building a company.
Right. I've heard that entrepreneurism defined as courage executing on creativity. So you have to have a certain amount of courage. You have to be able to execute on it, and you have to have something new or creative to drive that, to make it a real entrepreneurial venture.
I think too, though, that is why a lot of companies and small companies need to do this too, is to have a mission statement and a vision statement. Because I find with Fireside, when I'm like in the doldrums a little bit, I can go back to that original vision and that original mission. And it's kind of reinvigorates me for working in my company.
Yeah. And I would say a big motivator for me is fear of being broke.
That's a good one.
That's a good motivator.
I feel like crud today, but if I don't go out there and do it, the whole thing's going to fall apart and I'm going to be out on the street. So
right. Maybe another way of putting that is, and I totally agree. I mean, it's, some people are so kind of romantic about entrepreneurship. It's pretty hardcore. It's pretty far from romantic. And I mean, what worries me the most is not being able to pay my team salaries and not being able to kind of support the people that have trusted in our idea and kind of joined together and taken risk with me. And that's probably the worst thing. I'm going to be fine. I can go flip burgers or do something else and survive, but it's back to the people that work for you and that bet on you. And investors as well, not letting investors down that have also believed in you. That's the pressure that you need to live by. And then back to, I really liked your statement, and it's back to really, really fighting through and believing both intellectually and emotionally in the initial idea that you put in place. And if you don't believe in that idea still, then you're in trouble, because you need to have that belief, that conviction to hold on to when you meet those tough days. And in my instance right now, I really did have that, because I had the experience of understanding the changing music industry. And I saw an opening in the market, which I truly intellectually believed in, that music in the public domain is important. It's a multi-billion-dollar market, and no one else is doing it because it's really complex to build music streaming services, and it's very capital intense. And thirdly, you also need to deal with the IP challenge of sourcing all the content. And we have 10,000 direct deals with rights holders that provide us with around 50 million tracks in 74 markets. So that's the complexity that we're dealing with.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of those, I'm sure a lot of those, not all of those deals are the same, right? So different royalties, different licenses, different territories, or maybe they all are the same, in which case you're a genius if you can pull that off. But if you've got 10,000 different agreements, then that can be a really big challenge to keep track of all that. So for sure. So,
No, that is, I mean, back to the entrepreneurship question. And it's easy to come up with the idea, or the easiest component is coming up with the idea, and then secondarily executing on it and raising the money and building the team. That's super hard. But then I've also added this component of IP complexity. And yes, it's super complex to get there. It's taken me 3.5 years. But at the same time, it creates a massive defensibility at the same time. So I'm building complexity for anyone else trying to come after this market. So they basically have to replicate the 10,000 deals that I've done that are classified information. So they have to work through those weeds as well, which obviously should pay off someday.
Huge barrier to entry by competitors, for sure. Do you feel, though, that the entrepreneurial process has helped you grow as a person? Because when you're facing all of these challenges, and you sometimes, most of the time, or at least one day a week, you overcome them, doesn't that create sort of an internal personal growth as you go through that process?
For sure. I mean, it's part of my life. Every entrepreneur, the company and what they're building right now takes a huge part of their day-to-day life and their personal development. Sometimes too much, in my opinion. Sometimes it consumes everything, and family has to step aside. And for me, it's been very important to kind of do this at the same time as I can stay sane and balance the things that actually are more important. And I think that I remind myself about that the whole time. I'm privileged enough to work with my passion, music. I'm privileged enough to work with an amazing team, with amazing investors. And yes, I've been a big part of getting there for sure, but I didn't do it alone. And while I'm doing it, you only have maybe 80, 90 years at best on this earth. During that period, you have a lot of things you have to achieve. And for me, it's been family is an important thing. So for me, that has always been a very, very important component to balance. Traveling 200 days per year, which was the case sometimes, it was very challenging, but you always have to have something else to stay sane. That's at least my opinion, something else that's more important, because at the end of the day, it's only a job. It's only a company. And if I get up in the morning and can go there, I perceive myself lucky.
Yeah, I mean, my personal experience is before starting Gerhardt Law, I worked for a large pharmaceutical corporation. I was traveling a lot. I was away a lot. And over time, I realized that the only people who are really going to remember me when it's all over is my family. You know, my employees might occasionally think of me sometimes, but who's going to really remember all of this stuff, right? And so I do agree with you that the family piece cannot be underrated. And
my point being, it's not just about the personal romantic fact that it is important for me. It's also, without it, I probably wouldn't have been as strong in what I did at work, because it keeps you sane. I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs who get completely consumed by their company to the point where they're not cool people to hang out with anymore. There's just nothing else there. It's just only the company. And at that point, I don't know if most of them start, it starts showing in performance. It starts kind of in the interpersonal interplay with their team. It just becomes everything for them. And that becomes a negative trend down the line. So I think it's important for entrepreneurs, even if it's tough and 9 out of 10 days are challenging, it's tough to have something to keep you sane, to bring you back to reality, even if you're doing good or if you're doing bad.
That's great.
I agree. I think it's important to take a break too. Richard got injured and then sick, and he had to take a break. And he wouldn't before that. He worked all day Thanksgiving. Anyway, it was really good for his mental health. And even if you can only take 3 days or even just a long weekend, whatever, I think people do need to take a break, because then you step back from your business and you actually, in Richard's case, come up with really creative new ideas a lot of times.
Yes. So sickness and injury as a matter of relieving stress is my new path.
Don't do it that way. I'm trying to convince him to take a vacation.
Maybe that's a startup right there. Like, we can guarantee we guarantee you sickness, balance, sickness, and injuries for maximum creativity.
Ola, this has been great. We have to take a break right now. You're listening to Passage to Profit on WOR 710, the voice of New York. Passage to Profit will be right back after this message.